Are you happy with your own photography?
Never, and I don't think one should be.
Hello. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Tomash and this is Photography Radio. On today's show, I am talking to Michael Kenna, British fine art photographer, best known for his images of black and white landscapes. His work has been displayed all over the world. He has permanent exhibitions in the Museum of Decorative Arts in Prague, the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., and in the Bibliothèque in Paris. Michael Kenna has been and remains one of my personal photographic gurus, and I am extremely happy to be able to share my conversation with him on this very first episode of Photography Radio. Let's dive straight into my conversation.
Can you imagine your life without photography? No? Then you will love this show. And it doesn't matter if you're a DSLR, a mirrorless, or a mobile phone shooter. We're here to help your photography grow. This is Photography Radio.
Hello, Michael. You know, the main purpose of this podcast is to keep photographers from all around the globe motivated, to help them with keeping their passion on fire. So let me just get straight to the point and start with this question. 99% of your photographs are square format black and white images, as far as I know. And you have been doing that for more than 40 years. So how on earth does one stay motivated and keeps shooting mainly landscapes in the same format for such a long time?
Good morning, Tomash. I'm in Seattle. You're in Switzerland, so it's a slightly different time zone. I'm very interested in your statistic of 99%. You know, it could be 97.75. I don't.
So I was not so much off.
Well, you know, I started with many different medias, many different cameras. I experimented with, you know, panoramas and 35 millimeters and horizontal and 8x10, 4x5, lots of different ones. For the first 10 years, I used 35 millimeter. I found, as often happens when you're using the same camera over and over, it becomes to be predictable, which has pros. It also has cons because you tend to get a little trapped into those formats. And I moved into the 2.25 medium in the mid-'80s, purposely to break up my rhythm, essentially. And I used a waist level finder, so everything was back to front and slightly upside down, and made photographing a little more difficult. And I think that is one of the keys to photography generally, is that we don't want to get too comfortable at any one time. Now I've been using this camera on and off since the mid-'80s. So yes, 30 plus years. It's a great camera. At the same time, I've experimented with lots of different other formats, and I often use Holgers, little cheap plastic cameras. I often feel that, you know, the camera has very little to do with one's photographic journey. Just happens that the Hasselblad I use is really a utilitarian, quite precise, but very basic camera. It comes with its basic functions of lens, body, you know, film back, and viewfinder. And those are interchangeable, so if they break down, I can replace them. It's like an old lawnmower for me. I know the camera very, very well. I don't think it has much to do with the camera in terms of one's passion for photography. I think it has much more to do with one's inner drive to discover, to be curious, to constantly investigate and explore. I can see, you know, using the same camera for the next 200 years and finding sufficient material to keep me motivated for many lifetimes. That has never been an issue with me. You know, there are so many places, so many countries, so many things to photograph and just to look at that I just don't ever see it as an issue, kind of the lack of inspiration. For me, it is much more a matter of trying to rein in all the divergent, diverse, numerous, different possibilities. And you know, I would hope that is for everyone. It's just, you know, life is so amazing. The journey is so amazing. There's so many fantastic places to go photograph that it's difficult for me to understand a kind of a lack of inspiration, a lack of drive. I think there's so much out there.
When you talk about the cameras, you actually answered my question, which I have here prepared for later. So, because I can imagine that the photographic equipment itself, camera lenses are relatively low, exactly on your personal priority list.
Absolutely, yes.
But in order to pursue a certain vision, certain look, or simply a certain format of images, it is necessary to choose the photographic gear accordingly, right?
Well, I think, yes. I mean, for me, it wouldn't make sense to use, a digital camera with all these bells and whistles, for example. It's just not my character. I prefer it's like an old, well-worn guitar that I've been playing for years and years and years. Yes, I can go into electronics and GarageBand and all these other things, but when it comes down to the instrument you're using, it needs to be a part of your body almost, a part of your creative function. I have no interest in the gadgetry as such. The simpler the better for my way of working. But that is just me. And as you say, everybody has to choose their own instrument of communication. So for some people, it is, drones and various, new cameras and techniques. And that's perfectly fine. It just doesn't fit with my way of working.
What was it that fascinated you about this square format? Because you are mainly known for square format images, right?
I would think so at this point, yes. But I certainly wasn't the first 10 years of my career because I didn't use it. What fascinates me, I think, it is for me an open universe. I don't find that I'm confined as with most other formats, such as 35 millimeter. In which, as I mentioned, you already have to make decisions of whether this should be horizontal or vertical, and how do I fit things into this rectangle. With a square, you're basically playing with 4 equal sides, and so you can compose accordingly. I still have the option, and often use it, to crop later, not necessarily into a square. If you actually look at the work I do, not many of them are real squares. They're slightly horizontal, slightly vertical. Sometimes I make a square into a panorama, either vertical or horizontal. So for me, it just gives me an enormous amount of flexibility.
Would you say composing in square format, composing the image is in a way easier, or is it just more open? I mean, gives you more options.
I think it gives you more options. I don't think it's either easier or more difficult. I think it's just another possibility. And
how about black and white? Because again, I would be hard pressed, I think, to recall a color image of yours.
Only commercial work. I just again find I have a proclivity towards the monochromatic spectrum. So most of the artwork that I appreciate is monochromatic, black and white. Again, it's just a personal thing. I often say that we see in color all the time. That's our world. So when you reduce something to black and white, it immediately becomes more of an interpretation. It's a little more mysterious. It's a little more calming. For me, more meditational almost. I often use the reference to writing, and I say that I prefer my work to be more of a haiku poem with just a few elements, a lot of simplicity, but a great amount of suggestion, as opposed to an encyclopedia with huge amounts of facts and description. That is not what I'm interested in doing.
All right. Mm-hmm. Does it happen at all these days for you that you using whatever camera it might be, shoot some color images?
Well, not seriously. I mean, I recently, finally came around to getting one of these smartphone things so I can take snaps of wherever I go. Now that Polaroid doesn't exist, it's actually very useful because it tells me where I am when I go back later to try to reference that place. So yes, I photograph in color just to make snaps, but it really doesn't interest me very much. The first thing I do is convert it back into black and white to see what it looks like. I just find black and white enables you to use your imagination much more than color. But it's a personal thing.
In one of your interviews from several years ago, I guess, you said there are great photographs by ordinary photographers and ordinary photographs by great photographers.
Oh, I think I was smart in those days.
So let me ask you, for your own very subjective opinion, how often does Michael Kenna manage to produce a great photograph?
I'm still trying. Haven't got one yet, but one of these days. I don't,
Are you?
That's an impossible question because you could never put that description upon one of your own photographs.
Are you happy with your own photography?
Never, and I don't think one should be. Yes, I'm content that I'm on this wonderful journey, and it's been an amazing expedition. But I don't think anybody should ever be satisfied with the work they do. One should always be striving. There's this, my favorite football team is Everton, and they have this motto. It's called nil satis nisi optimum, which in Latin means nothing but the best is good enough. So you give your best all the time. You strive for perfection all the time, but hopefully you never reach it, because if you reach perfection, the image probably wouldn't be that interesting. It's one of the things that I resist with the digital revolution, is that it's so easy to make things so perfect and so clean and so tidy that they kind of lose their ability to evoke a reaction, to evoke emotion. It becomes a little antiseptic, I think. So the striving for perfection is wonderful, but I don't think I've ever reached it or ever will, I hope.
When you would have to single out those moments, of satisfaction in this, because there must be some on the way in the process, would you say this is the moment you click the shutter most for you, or when you print the image? Where is this moment of excitement, when you get goosebumps, or those moments that keep you going?
I think it's a whole package, isn't it? In this journey, there is the preparation, there is finding the locations, there is seeing something wonderful happen, there is being actually present at a phenomena, to then eventually process the negatives and see the result on a contact sheet. It's just like Christmas, this amazing discovery, and then to go into the darkroom and then to realize that through the printing process, and then to mount it and present it and have it in an exhibition or a book. Every facet is quite wonderful, and it varies from photograph to photograph. I've often said that in my way of working, that when I'm out and I see something, and yes, I get those goosebumps, and I think this is amazing, this is going to be the best photograph I've ever made. It's often quite predictable somehow. It doesn't quite translate the emotion that I felt when I was photographing. And often it's the photograph, either before or a photograph a little bit later, that turns out to be more interesting than the one that I predicted would be the best one. And so I've come to fill myself with doubt at all times when I'm photographing. I never accept that I have, a good photograph or the best photograph or the best I can do. I continue to work through something to the point of exhaustion almost, because I always realize that the best photograph may be around the corner. It's not. Ansel Adams had this wonderful saying that when you photograph something, you should always look behind you, because what is behind you is often far more interesting than what you see in front of you. And I think it's this. It's a bit the same, when you're photographing. That now digitally we tend to, or people, I don't, because I don't have a digital camera, but people tend to make a photograph and immediately look to see what they have. I don't have that possibility, and purposely I don't want to know what I have. I want to always be second guessing, always in doubt, always thinking, well, maybe the best photograph is the next one, rather than the one I took 5 minutes ago.
Are opinions of other people about your work important to you?
I want everybody to love my work, of course. but ultimately, you can't please all the people all of the time. It's impossible, because we all have different points of view. We all have different visions, and it would be extremely boring if we all liked the same things. There are many visual works out there that leave me cold, which may be considered masterpieces. And there's nothing wrong with the work. It's something that's perhaps lacking in me, that I have a certain way of looking, and certain things please me, and I react to certain things. And I would expect that from every other viewer. So yes, it's always great when you have people liking your work, but I don't think that should be the main reason you do it.
In your case, I would say there is quite a big group of people, admiring your work. So existence of this group, of those people, of those admirers, it must be some kind of a kick on a regular basis. I mean, something that keeps you, it is something that helps, right?
Yeah, so absolutely. Yes, it's good to have positive affirmation from anybody, and the more people you have it from, probably the more motivation you have to keep going, I would think.
What would you tell to a photographer who is currently in the middle of a creative crisis, who thinks that his work is not good enough, who, just wants to give up photography entirely, but he loves it. He loves he loves photography, he loves this whole thing. But how would you talk to such person?
Well, I think it's, it's like this with any creative path and medium. You will have obstacles, you will have hurdles, you have gates you have to climb over or go around. It's necessary, and it's usually at the times of, most crises when you have the biggest breakthroughs, creative breakthroughs. But it takes a lot of determination and passion and self-will and just work. You just have to constantly work. You have to be constantly moving and looking and trying to find new ways of expressing yourself. I think it's inevitable that everybody on a creative path has these crises. But it's when we go back to that first question, even if you're in crisis, it's an amazing thing to do, to be out photographing, to be communicating and enjoying and connecting, with visual subject matter. So I don't have any particular formula of how to get through crisis, except you just work through it.
So you would be suggesting to go out and work even harder, because there are some people who actually suggest, taking a break.
This is a weird analogy, but I had back issues many years ago, and if you go to one doctor, they'd say you need to have surgery for this. You should stop like running, because I run lots of marathons and things and walk with backpacks, and I just like to be physical. And so one doctor would say, you need surgery for this. We can schedule in. And you go to another doctor and they say, you need to get in the gym and work out and get muscles to protect this area. They're both valid. Which one do you choose? I would always choose the proactive one. I would try to keep going, even faster perhaps, and endure more and kind of build the muscle. And when you're working in the visual arts, you are building muscle. It's kind of fortification almost. The more ideas you have, the more creative expression you put into it, the more you're padded for those times of crisis, in a sense. You have reserves that you can go back to. You're not on the fine edge.
Okay, black and white square format. You're also the master of long exposures. Many of your images are very long exposures. Is any of your cameras capturing a long exposure somewhere right now as we are recording this conversation?
Unfortunately not. No, it's light here. If it was dark, maybe. Yes, I'd like to leave cameras out in the landscapes, on the roof. If I'm ever in a hotel, I'd like to stick a camera out the window and let it run for 5 or 6 hours and just see what happens. And most times, it's not so interesting, but occasionally you get some very fascinating results that are unplanned and unpredicted, which I like very much.
Do you try to photograph every day?
No, I don't. I have a very strong home life here. I have children, family, and so I have lots of things to attend to while I'm home. I tend to divide my time into, now I'm a photographer. I'm getting on a plane, I'm going somewhere, the next 10 days, I think, breathe, eat, sleep, photography, and I can do that. And it works very, very well for me. It's a little more difficult when you have all the, the aspects of living in a family life, to then also try to be a photographer at the same time. I do all my printing, all my retouching, all my editing, selection process, lots of stuff here on the home front, but I don't photograph as much when I'm at home.
So I can imagine when you go on a trip, when you go photographing, you prefer doing it alone.
Yes, that is the best possible scenario for me as a photographer, but not necessarily for all photographers. At the same time, it's always good to have somebody watching your back, so you're not, spending the time thinking, is somebody going to steal my camera? How do I find a hotel room? How do I get from here to there? What am I going to eat? There's all these, basic things that we have to think about as human beings in this world. And they take away from the focus of photography. So often I travel with a guide. It's not usually a photographic assistant. I don't really need one of those, but I often need somebody to deal with some of the logistics so that I can actually spend my time most efficiently by being a photographer.
Wonderful. Michael, the last thing I ask my photography radio guests is to give our listeners an assignment. So something they could, something they could try doing today to give their photography another kick. So would you have an assignment for us?
Well, I think back to when I worked for one of my gurus, Ruth Bernhard, a wonderful photographer. And the assignment that she would give to people was to photograph within 10 feet of your bed for a week. Not go anywhere. Find what is around you. The gift of the commonplace, she called it. That was extremely difficult for me because I love to jump on planes and go thousands of miles away. So we were constantly kind of arguing about that, which is a good way to explain that, we all have different ways of doing things. What I would suggest, and quite sincerely, is, if you have a digital camera, then to, tape over the viewfinder so you have no idea what you're getting. I think that is difficult for a lot of people these days because we want instant gratification. For us film photographers, I would actually suggest photographing without a camera. I mean, I've often suggested photographing without film in the camera. So you're going through the process, but there's no final results. It's all in your mind. I think as a photographer, we need to get away from this idea of being a paparazzi, that we always need results, that the end, always justifies the means somehow. I sincerely believe that the journey is powerfully important. It's a crucial aspect of creativity. And if we don't actually see the results, then the creative process goes on in our mind and in our soul, in our heart. And sometimes that's a very, very powerful way of kind of jump-starting, being a catalyst for that creative process.
Wonderful advice. Thanks so much. Thank you so much, Michael, for accepting my invitation. And
great pleasure, Tomash. You owe me a glass of wine in Switzerland someday.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. Anytime, right? Thanks so much, Michael. Have a great night. Enjoy your travels.
Thank you so much. Take care of yourself.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation. On top of being an excellent photographer, Michael is such a nice person. I hope his thoughts and ideas added some necessary fuel to go on with your own photography. It certainly gave me this additional kick we always can need when working on our images. Have a great day, everyone. Let your photography friends know about Photography Radio, and if you haven't done so yet, subscribe to the podcast. Head over to photographyradio.com to find out how to do it. My name is Tomash, and I will talk to you next